here with us today. She can offer some incredible perspectives as she wears many different hats as a consultant, as the global futurist at Accenture, a sci-fi enthusiast and a consumer, and a writer focused on future scenarios. So welcome back, Sylvia. We would love to hear what's on your mind today.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Maria. Just wanted to check that everyone can hear me well. There was some echo previously. Sounds good? All right. So thank you so much, Maria and Future Hacker, for inviting me to speak today along such wonderful futures thinkers and futures builders. I'm always impressed and inspired by the work Future Hacker does for the community of futurists and future inquirers like me. And what we have heard so far is really another illustration of your talents. So thank you so much for having me today. As Maria, you just explained, my name is Sylvia Galuso. I live in San Francisco. I'm really thrilled to join you today as a futurist, as a tech innovation strategist at Accenture. Also as an entrepreneur. Before being at Accenture, I created 2 companies, and one of them is Silicon Humanism, which is a futures research company dedicated to exploring the future of tech, of work, of education, of health, and of aging as well. I'm also the host of a think tank dedicated to the ethics of the futures within the Association of Professional Futurists, already involved into ethical futures. And on top of that, as you just said, I'm a voracious science fiction consumer. As a reader, also as a TV series enjoyer, so you will have a lot of examples from TV series from me today. And finally, I also love to write speculative fiction. So as you imagine, I couldn't be more excited could have been more excited when Maria shared with me the topic of this year's Quantum Thinking Conference. How can we picture the future through the sci-fi lens? So what I want to do is kind of draw a parallel here between the job of a futurist and the specificities of science fiction, and illustrate how sci-fi can be really an incredible tool at the service of the futurists. Marta, Paola, and JP, you have already shown a lot of this, so maybe it will be just a double click on what you've been illustrating so well so far. But back to the process of future stories. So usually you start by studying the environment. You would scan for signals of the future, signals of change, weak signals, you name it. And then out of those, you would extrapolate to build up scenarios and identify opportunities within those future scenarios so that you can finally backcast from those scenarios to build your own action plans or your roadmap to the future. So that's the methodology in a few words. One important aspect of our work as futurists is really to stretch our minds into different directions and to consider futures in plural. One famous methodology by Jim Dator introduced it, for example, for scenarios: growth, constraints, collapse, and transform. It really has the merits, not just considering one best case or one worst case scenarios. And we are here optimist futurists, so I'm glad to hear that, JP. But what we really try to do when we create scenarios is to address different data points on the full future spectrum. So as you build scenarios, you also want to give substance to these prospective scenarios, especially to push the thinking towards where there can be pockets of opportunities within those futures, or even to prepare for potential risk that you can identify in those futures. So to do that, you will want to project stakeholders vividly into those scenarios. As such, a major component of our foresight work is really to help stakeholders with picturing the future. So I like that you use the word picture, because in picturing the future, there's projecting people into those different perspectives and visions of the future to better foresee, but also feel, sense, empathize, and identify opportunities. So therefore, empathy, the capacity to envision, the creativity and storytelling are really key qualities of great futurists. So I'm sure you see where I'm heading. Fiction and science fiction in particular are really an amazing tool to achieve this, to create emotions, to create feelings, reactions, and strong provocations to push you into action towards the future. So I want to focus today on three components to kind of launch the conversation, trying to bring here some examples from TV series and a few other sci-fi fiction book. So three aspects. The first one is world building. The second is artifacts. And the third one is authenticity. So world building. Sci-fi takes the time to create not just a story, but really a full world with different layers. You have the social, technological, economic, environmental, political, even legal, and sometimes even ethical, to really follow the steeper analytic framework that we use in futures thinking as well. It will develop rules, roles, constraints, and so on. So, for example, a TV series that do it nicely, and you've been mentioning it as well, Black Mirror. Each installment projects you into a new world in a few seconds, and the interest raised from understanding the rules and the constraints in this new world. And what's also interesting with Black Mirror is that the artistic approach and the variety of colors, of cinematographic techniques and style chosen for each episode really anchors the world building. Another one that I've seen recently and really enjoyed as well is extrapolations. So just the name absolutely refer to our job as futurists. So extrapolations focuses on climate change, but it tells stories from different perspectives so that it really polishes all dimensions of the future. You have the social, environmental, of course, but also business and religion as well as a big part in this. So we follow, for example, a former law student becoming a rabbi in order to help the people affected by the rising temperature. You also follow a tech billionaire developing a patent for water desalination to ease the world's problems. Or you follow a researcher that studies the last humpback whale. And another particularity of the series is that it takes place over a very long period of time, which with different data points, and each episode focusing on a time horizon from 2037 to 2070. Another example, Silo, which I also enjoy a lot. It does a great job at creating a society cut off from the exterior world with roles. You have the sheriff, the mayor, judicial, mechanical, and so on. Whereas people that ask to leave the silo are sent out to clean up the windows outside of the silos, which actually becomes not just a part of the world building, but a main dramatic component of the story. So the storyline and the world building are really intertwined, and that's what makes it very exciting. You can think also of The Handmaid's Tale, where Gilead is this dystopian version of the US, with a specific system of values, rules, extremely constrained society that does really not favor women's education and thriving. Just to mention here, the main character, Offred, gets her name from the commander she serves, but it is also an echo to the word offered, as handmaids completely sacrifice themselves to accomplish maternity for their families. And also of red, the very colors that defines those servants. So every little details contributes to creating that world building. So the vocabulary can be very rich in fiction. I want to kind of double click here. From the relics in Silo, these objects from the past that can vary from harmless items like a pest dispenser to more dangerous objects like hard drives containing historical data and so on. In the book Clara and the Sun, we have also vocabulary that's quite interesting, like the oblong, which is a sort of tablet or phone, or the concept of being a lifted child, which resonates with being gifted, but also genetic modification to make those kids smarter. Or having an AF, which is an artificial friend. And once again, those concepts are really becoming a main aspect of the plot itself. And this leads us to my second point, which is the artifacts. Some artifacts can be memorable, and thank you so much for all this reference to Minority Report, like the computer interfaces, the full body gestures, the gigantic transparent screens, the voice control homes, the personalized ads that scream the character's name, the movie as he walks by, or even the driveways of driverless cars. All those are absolutely memorable artifacts from Minority Report. You can think also of the steel suits in Dune, which presents itself as a full bodysuit worn in the open desert of the planet Arrakis. And it was specifically designed to preserve the body's moisture. So through the artifacts, you have also a lens onto the world that you're building. In a short story by Te Chiang that I really like, which is called Exhalation, we get introduced to replacement lungs. So the characters, every day, they consume 2 lungs heavy with air, and at the end of the day, they remove the empty ones from their chest, and they replace them with full ones. So you have oxygen bar where you literally refill your lungs. The TV series, Hello Tomorrow, to be back to TV, is almost the complete showcase of future artifacts. And even if the series is about an alternate past, you can think of those floating cars or the robot bartender. You have video call booths that are not exactly like the ones we have as we Zoom. You have lunar design everywhere in an hyper-consumerist society. So what's particularly interesting here is how these aesthetics have been inspired by how our predecessors imagined the future years ago, and how these imagined artifacts are here brought to life, ready for our life. And once again, coming back to Black Mirror, because I think that they really do one of the best use of future artifacts. In more traditional sci-fi shows, the viewer is introduced to a new technology in many details. Through the character of a newbie, for example, you can think back of Minority Report as the precogs are introduced. Well, in Black Mirror, the logic is a bit different. You first get like visual cues or symbols or metaphors that really require you to engage actively with what is going on. I just name one episode because I could do that for each of them, but in Beyond the Sea with Aaron Paul and Josh Hartnett, the artifact is a link between an astronaut in space and their machine replica done on Earth. And it's not introduced in an over-explicative educational manner. It is just placed in the environment for us to be frontally faced with it, to slowly understand the implications and the consequences. So you start to gather cues that something is special as you witness one of the astronauts being weirdly patted by a stranger in a movie theater, or as the parents of the child are questioning the effect of the new setting on him. And what I find particularly interesting with this approach to artifacts, kind of new approach to artifacts, is that it's very similar to how Institute for the Future uses artifacts, that it works with artifacts from the future. It's about placing them in an everyday environment for people to get a strong reaction to those artifacts. And if you think about it, many of Black Mirror episodes focus on one innovation at a time. It is not always a completely new world, but it's more like a world that could be similar to ours, or in the case of that episode I was mentioning in the life in 1969, with a man who cuts hoods with an axe in his backyard, but has this special seat that connects him to his space self in one of the bedrooms. And that leads us to my last point, and I will accelerate a bit because I see we're running out of time here, authenticity. So when sci-fi starts to be a really good tool for future thinking, I think, is when the goal is not just to display huge amounts of technology, but more to have an authentic story set in a future setting. I would even say that too much science fiction, an overload of advanced technology, can be counterproductive and even off-putting, as the viewer or the reader doesn't find a common ground to really connect and empathize. And I have to admit here that it's often how I feel when I start reading William Gibson, because in the first pages, I get lost with too many new terms or concepts that I have a hard time connecting with each other and with like a potential life. So I really like that new approach, more thoughtful about how much new tech you bring on screen, or how much new tech you bring in the first pages, and the way delivering artifacts is more subtle and it's made in a more intimate manner. I think it's both a new trend of current sci-fi, but it's also a great component of success to create effective future thinking. And here's thinking about a couple of examples. Back to Silo. In the first episode of the series, the main characters are trying to have a baby. They have been selected, and they have literally 1 year to try and get pregnant. So it addresses the topic of fertility, but in a very delicate manner, an intimate manner, with a focus on the reactions of the couple as the months pass by and no pregnancy happens, with a focus on mental health. And as relics are introduced, the relics we're mentioning as well, we don't get a lecture on what relics are. We slowly understand that they are objects that you might want to hide, that they are traded on the black market, that they refer to another time. So you discover it from a very personal perspective. And I like, Marta, that you presented Riot Baby and underline that it's about people and behaviors and not about ideas. That's really what current sci-fi does really great. And my last example to close this topic. Similarly, For All Mankind, my favorite one, allocates a lot of space for mental health topics, including grief, anger, feeling lonely in space, alcoholism, jealousy, competition, sexual identity, and so on. So the result is that whatever the time frame, this closes the gap with your current self and the notion of an estranged future self. Those characters in the future feel human. They feel close to us. They have similar concerns and joys. They live similar dramas, and we empathize strongly with them. In For All Mankind, the head of NASA is a woman who loves to listen to jazz music, talking about music again, and play the piano, which is a genuine touch to the character. And it reminds us that people are not unidimensional in the way they could be depicted in old-fashioned series, where sometimes the storyline and the intensity of science fiction and action took over the development of believable characters. Marta also mentioned how Black Mirror makes the story personal and almost like you are the main character of the story. So as a consequence, characters displaying tastes, complexities, and ambiguities, dilemma, it makes them more agents of their future. They seem less predetermined to act. And this reminds us also of our own human dilemmas, but also empowerment, that we can act on the future. Thank you.
Sylvia, thank you so much. And you just gave us so many great examples and great references that I feel that I definitely will have to watch this event again on our channel on YouTube. Take some notes because I have a whole new watch list and reading list ahead of me. So thank you so much. So let's go to the roundtable, the questions. We're